do work for the Eugene 4J School District. I have a pretty long handle. I am the McKinney-Vento Homeless Student Liaison. So my role in the district is to basically get kids in school and keep them in school. The McKinney-Vento program is a federal program. It's a title program. It's been around for a very long time. And each district in the whole country has a liaison that advocates for homeless students. At the heart of this law is school stability. So a big portion of our job, or my job, is to get students enrolled and keep them in school. Now, if you're homeless, you may have multiple moves during the school year. So one of the big pieces of this is what we call a school of origin right and transportation to and from that school. So if a parent and a child are living in a car and then they become part of the First Place Night Shelter, which many of you are familiar with, and then they move into permanent housing, there's 3 moves right there. And we want that student to remain at the school they started in throughout that whole academic year. The statistic is for in a homeless student situation, for every time a student moves, they can lose up to 3 months of academic progress. So 3 moves times 3, a whole year behind in academically. So it is imperative that they stay put at, at all possible. So that's a big part of that, coordinating all the transportation, helping folks enroll. There's a part of the law also stipulates that families can, and youth as well, can enroll without documentation. So if you think of a situation where a youth has been kicked out and they've slept a couple nights on the street, and they haven't been in school, and they go to the nearest school and enroll, they have a right to enroll themselves and get started. Everybody has a right to public education. And it doesn't, hinge on, do you have an address? Do you have a permanent address? Do you have proof of that address? Do you have a utility bill? That was the standard for many, many years, and you can imagine that students just did not go to school. So that's a little bit about my job, and I'm going to pass it on to Becca.
My name is Becca Larsen, and I work for the 4J School District under the McKinney-Vento program with Deborah. I am only part-time, and I work primarily with the unaccompanied youth in all of our 5 high schools that we have. I do about the same thing that Deborah does: get students enrolled, keep them enrolled. My goal. Provide a lot of basic needs support and access to other community agencies and resources.
One of the things that I can piggyback on is when I worked, before Becca was in this position, when I would work with a youth, because some of you might have picked up the data. Last year we identified 811 students in the school district as homeless under the McKinney-Vento program. So we're pretty busy, and there's a lot of needs and work to do. So what I found was with the unaccompanied youth, if I would, meet them at a school and I would get them started in school or get a few basic needs, then I wouldn't be able to follow up. And when you're on your own, versus even having a parent that has, some mental illness issues or some other challenges going on, you still have another person on your team. So a child, there was a team working, and these unaccompanied youth, they're on their own so much. So the need is greater with those unaccompanied youth. And out of those 811, there were 250 students that were unaccompanied last year in Eugene. So anyway, didn't mean to interrupt, but that's the purpose of her role, and she can really get, follow up. She goes to the high schools and follows up and follows up and follows up, so they don't drop out. Basically, that's what we're trying to avoid. Yeah, Jenny.
I'm Jenny Vondracek, and I'm a longtime elementary ed teacher in 4J, 30 years of teaching, 20 of them at Edison. And I would say that we've seen a real increase in the McKinney-Vento or homeless population at Edison. I would say every year I have at least 2 students in my classroom, if not more, that are considered homeless or in some sort of transitional housing, and that would be true in every classroom at our school. And our enrollment has increased exponentially. We're busting at the seams right now, and the McKinney-Vento population has grown along with that over these last 20 years.
I could add to that there were 40 students at Edison identified, so in this neighborhood school, and there's 40 at Howard. So those are the 2 top schools in the district at this point. So that's always good to know, because we sometimes associate the south end of town with that lacking homelessness, and the need might be in other regions, but there's a very high need on this end of town.
So, my name is William, and I'm director of St. Louis DePaul's First Place Family Center. And basically, we work with families that are homeless or right on the edge and at risk of homelessness. Last year, we saw over 1,240 children with their parents at the center getting help. We work with folks to help them get stabilized, get jobs, get into housing. We have some government money and private money that can pay the move-in costs for families if they meet certain criteria that are set by the government. We have a really difficult housing market in this community for trying to get people who are low-income housed at all, because there's tremendous competition for the housing. You may have seen the news about a month ago about the most difficult housing markets in the United States. Seattle's number 1, and Eugene is number 2, Portland's number 8. So it's a steep climb, and we work really closely with families, get them back on their feet. In terms of month-to-month numbers, we see from 250 to 350 families each month that we work with, and they can be there long-term until they find stability. For myself, I've been director there for 13 plus years, and I've been in human services for over 50. I was a caseworker in East Los Angeles during the first Watts riots more than 50 years ago. So I have a very long view of this problem of poverty and homelessness and the like. I was assistant director of a 300 staff person welfare office in East LA back in those days. And just to say, it is worse now than I've seen in my lifetime in terms of poverty and homelessness and barriers for people becoming stable. At First Place, if I look at 2011, and then come forward to 2016, we have more than doubled the number of families we see per month in those 5 years. And these are folks that are in trauma and stress. I want to do a little experiment today. I want to try to personalize this issue of trauma, because homelessness, if nothing, is traumatic. It is one of the most traumatic things that can happen to a family and a child, and it has its consequences. And to kind of personalize it, most of us have had some trauma in our backgrounds too. And I want to look at a study that was done, that's what these questionnaires are, and talk about that briefly, and then talk about how this applies to the need for housing and working with people who are homeless. Traumatic stress has a powerful, powerful impact on children. Affects their whole life. Children who are under stress in their first 18 months have a much more difficult time than the rest of their life. And for the first 3 years, it's a really fragile time for the kids, and thereon. So what you have is something called ACEs. Stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. I don't want to re-traumatize anybody here, but I want to touch on it. The way this came about is Kaiser Permanente, based in San Diego, did a massive study of people that they had health records for, because it was a top health insurance company. So the people they're studying for that result of this are people that are basically upper middle class and well-to-do and having very top-notch health insurance. And what they did, they went through several hundred questions of possible traumatic events and had everybody score themselves on it. And in the sheet, you have the 10 things that happened to a greater number of people than any other thing they studied. And then from that, they did some research about the effect on their health. So, I mean, let's do this first one. And you don't have to mark it if you don't want. You can count on your fingers. There's only 10 of them. Or just notice if any of these apply to you. Did a parent or elder adult in the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, or act in a way that made you afraid that you might be physically hurt? If yes, that's just 1 point. And if it happened 10 times, it's still just 1 point. Did a parent or other adult in your household very often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you? Ever hit you so hard they left marks or you were injured? Did an adult or person at least 5 years older than you ever touch or fondle you, or have touched their body in a sexual way, attempt to, or actually have oral, anal, or vaginal intercourse with you? Did you often or very often feel that no one in your family loved you, or thought you were important or special? Or your family didn't look out for each other, feel close to each other, or support each other? Did you often or very often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, had no one to protect you, or your parents were too drunk or high to take care of you, or take you to the doctor if you needed it? Were your parents ever separated or divorced? Was your mother or stepmother often or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at her? Sometimes often, and it goes through this whole thing of getting beat up. Threatened with a gun or knife. Did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker, alcoholic, or used street drugs? Was a household member depressed or mentally ill? Or did a household member attempt suicide? And did a household member go to prison? So that's a list of 10 horrific things that in the study showed was the most common events that people who had trauma had experienced, plus whatever else went in the mix. And in this study, again, several thousand people, I believe 46% of them had at least one of these things in their background. And what the study says is that an ACEs score of 4 or more, things start getting serious. The likelihood of chronic pulmonary lung disease increased 390%, hepatitis 240, depression 460, and suicide 1,220% for people who had 4 of these things in their life before they were 18. The numbers get really high around 6. People who had 6 or more of these have a high risk of emotional illness and trauma of other kinds, more likely to have trouble their whole life about work and their relationships. And the expectation is that people who have 6 or more of these, statistically, have a 20-year shortened lifespan over the general population. So, I know everybody has some. Just to disclose, I have 4 of these for my background. On the back side, I'm not going to go through but touch on them. There's something called resiliency questionnaire. Because this data is horrible. There's a lot of people in distress. And since it's on the list, because these families were pretty well-to-do. But homelessness is every bit as traumatic to a family in many ways than most of these things I read here. And that's why I'm really concerned about what you folks are doing, looking toward housing, how to help people become stabilized and housed. It's the main thing we do at First Place. And what you folks do that's so awesome is kids that are in this traumatic situation, you have to stabilize as much as possible within the trauma of homelessness. But what we want to do, of course, is we want to do something about the homelessness itself. So the things that make up for this, so you may have had a bunch of things in this list and done really well. It's because you had so many things on the backside, resiliency. I believe my mother loved me when I was little. I believe my father loved me when I was little. Here's a really big one. When I was little, other people helped my mother and father take care of me, and they seemed to love me. When I was a child, there were relatives in my family who made me feel as if feel better if I was sad or worried. So, but these are things that help change people's lives for the plus. For me, the thing that covered it for me is we're in a duplex, and my grandmother was the safe place to go. And so when bad things happened, I had a place to go where I knew I was loved and protected. And it made a real difference in my life. It also helped set the career that I'm on, because I've been working in this realm for my whole life. All of these resilience things come down to one thing: relationships. So building housing, creating this is really important. But I want to urge you, if there's a way within your structure to stay in connection with the people that are there and to love them. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. What we really try to do at First Place Family Center is to create a place that's safe and warm and welcoming, non-shaming. We're not shaming people for the mistakes they make. And we don't say it out loud, but we really do our best to is to love them and to be real with them. Our tagline, the one line that distinguishes us that we came up with is this: stabilizing and empowering families through real relationships. And that just means we're real people to real people. My wife and I have 2 mentally ill children. One in her 40s and the other is 50, and they're living with us. And so if we're working with a family and there's someone with a mental illness or dealing with a family member, we'll disclose that. We understand. We've cried ourselves to sleep many nights when we didn't know where Michael was, when he was on the streets, etc. And so we're real with people. And real people having real relationships is what changes lives. There's a whole breakthrough going on in what's called interpersonal neurobiology. We've discovered that change through therapy or through anything else primarily happens not because of what you do in the context, but in the relationship between someone who's found stability and the ability to love in themselves and will spend time with you and share that in some just being with you kind of way. It's really powerful. So I just want to say about homelessness. You talk about homework. How do you do homework for you to have a home, right? That can be very challenging. It's really hard for kids, especially start getting older in homelessness. Shame and isolation due to having no home. There's a Netflix show, if you've forgotten what high school can be like, called 13 Reasons Why. And it's 13 reasons why this girl committed suicide and what affected it. And I didn't have a very good time in high school, but it was really powerful for me to watch this because it reminded me of how mean it can be and how insecure you can be in a high school setting. Can you imagine trying to go to high school and you can't bring your friends home because you don't have one, because you're living in a car or in a pickup camper? The other thing that's very traumatic is separation from their family, foster care, moving between relatives, moving between schools, changing teachers. So that's one of the really big things. One of the big things that helped me survive my traumatic background was one teacher. And he was a speech teacher, and he changed my life just in the relationship he had with me in his class. So thank you for doing that. I'll just mention First Place Kids program. We have a preschool 5 days a week. It's just 10 a.m. to 12:30. And we're the only drop-in preschool in the state of Oregon. Relief Nursery has wonderful programs, but your resiliency programs and the programs you go to, the child has to show up on time and be there regularly. Head Start is the same way. People who are living in cars, couch surfing, are unable to meet those standards. So we have a preschool that anytime the family comes by is there and we have room, then that child can be in the preschool, can learn to sit in a circle and sing songs and go outside and play with other children. We have children who are raised in car seats and have never really played with other children because they've been in a car their first several years. And so what we do by having this drop-in school is to give these kids a chance. And we do something called an ages and stages questionnaire. The schools work with those two to see when there are developmental delays or social emotional delays. And we do this to every child that comes to First Place. This is used in almost all the preschools throughout the state of Oregon. The average number of kids who need remedial help and needs intervention in some way overall is 5 to 7%. With our kids, there's 70 to 75% of the kids that need remediation and intervention by specialists, and we're able to provide that. So I'm passionate about the issue of homelessness and how enormously traumatic it is. So that's my little song and dance. We'll open it up to questions or comments.
Take a look at sales tax for Washington. Take a look at the sales tax for California. Split the difference and just institute it. And if that money could be used for public housing, that would address a lot of these problems.
What is the best service that is currently being offered for families with children?
Best service.
One of you would like to answer that?
Well, I can't put my finger on the best service in all of Eugene. There are layers and layers of services, and the fact that we work together and we have release of information with agencies and schools and shelters, and that to me answers this question. So there's agencies, St. Vincent de Paul does a great deal for homelessness. There are school districts, and then there are schools. It might be that one teacher. So it's really hard for me to point to one specific service that works. It takes all of us, all agencies, all, the school district, shelters, there's, working together. So, yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
I'm going to guess that the four of you represent a good answer to that question.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we're looking for services to provide services all the time. I mean, that's our, yeah. And there is a lot of coordination of services and working together with partners in Eugene.
We work with a lot of different community partners.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like I said earlier, I've been in the human service business for over 50 years, up and down the state. And I've never seen a community that's more generous and more caring. And I've never seen a group of agencies that work together so well. I was in a meeting and some government money came down, some thousands of dollars, and four of us made a presentation as to what we do with the money. And then three of the agencies pointed to the fourth agency and said, I think you guys will do a better job with it than we will. You take the money. Now that's absolutely unheard of in a business where in a nonprofit there's never enough money. So thank you. You're part of that community.
Jenny, we'd like to ask you, what are the notable differences between kids who have housing and kids who don't that you see?
Yeah, just on a daily basis, what I see is those kids don't tend to get good sleep. Their sleep habits aren't supported. If they're being bused from wherever they are, whether it's shelter care out on 99 or with the being able to the School of Origin Act, where they can come from wherever they may have moved from to the school that they started at, which oftentimes is Edison, because we have all of the first place family shelter kids. They have to get up very early in the morning. That bus ride can be up to 90 minutes in the morning. So they're up at 6, they're on the bus at 6:30, they haven't been fed breakfast. They don't get breakfast until they come to school at 8 o'clock. And I can see when they get off the bus, they're already pretty weary. And things have happened just on the bus in that 90-minute period that don't set them up for a very successful school day. In the classroom, they have, their ever-changing living situation doesn't support organizational skills, just things like bringing a backpack to school every day, or having a snack in the morning, or maybe getting the homework done, or keeping track of a library book that's been checked out and then being able to bring it back to participate in library checkout the next week. On a bigger scale, these students oftentimes have very irregular attendance, and we are not, it's a law that we cannot identify them for special ed services if they have irregular attendance, probably caused by homelessness. So these students, well, we talked about remediation, they aren't able to get remediation, the remediation that would really be so helpful to them, small group reading or math, because we can't qualify them for that help. And at Edison in particular, we are not a title school. We don't have the free and reduced lunch numbers that would allow us to get the extra little title funding that would allow for just some small group work for those kids that don't, that kind of fall between the cracks. So we have a real case of the haves and the have-nots at our school. The only other thing that I think about is these kids, because they do have to be bused, there oftentimes isn't parent transportation before and after school. They can never stay after school for after school activities, kids sports, soccer practice, on our field. And those kinds of things are what kind of cement relationships and friendships for those kids and for the parents as well. I mean, a lot of stuff happens after school on the playground and at soccer practices and soccer games on the weekends. These kids don't have the ability to stay and be a part of any of that. So I see that they don't get invited to birthday parties. They're not part of the sleepovers, and that is really sad to see that. But very real. Very real.
Thank you. Becca, I'd like to give you a chance to answer this question first. What advice would you give our church community should we decide to host families on site?
I think just really understanding the barriers that homeless families face. If it is being able to comply with certain rules that are set in place for the housing, mental health issues, just kind of the barriers that they really face.
Anybody else want to add to that?
I would step in and say that being really, really clear about what you intend to do, what the limits are, the boundaries are, so that there's no confusion. My experience is people under stress hear what they want to hear and misunderstand, and then they break a rule and they don't know they've done it. And so that clarity, and again, some kind of ongoing relationship. When with the rapid rehousing programs and things, when we get someone in housing, we do a home visit once a week with the family, and we help them with the budget, and we help them figure out stuff. And if you haven't been housed for a long time, even carrying the trash is something that may not get done without some intervention. And the core belief that we have at First Place Family Center, and I'll pass it on to you guys, is that everyone does the best they're able all the time. Not the best they know in their head, but the best they're able to do all the time based on their beliefs about themselves, their beliefs about the world, and their place in the world. That ties right back to the resiliency and the trauma things. And so we have some strict rules at First Place, and it doesn't get you off the hook that we know you're doing the best you're able. But when somebody does something that breaks a rule, our approach is as to how stupid are you. We really try to go, what's the world look like through this person's eyes? Does this make sense to them? And so again, in relationship, I noticed there's a lot of trash building up around your unit. Can we help you figure out how to deal with this? And so if you give the people the benefit of the doubt, and again, come back, care about them, boundaries are important, rules are important, but also caring about them, you'll go a lot further. Because this is what these folks need. A lot of the folks need really someone to help them navigate in the more stable reality that they haven't had. Because so many of the parents of the children that you're talking about had the same kind of childhood and educational experience that they had.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'd like to open it up now to anyone in the audience who has a question. Yeah, Mike?
Quick question. What do you attribute the 5-year doubling of the crisis situation that you're seeing? What do you attribute that to?
There's multiple factors. One big factor, as I mentioned, is the housing market. Housing has gotten radically more expensive. Rentals are hard to come by. A lot of our families haven't had good rental experience, and so maybe they've been evicted because they lost jobs, so it's hard for them to find housing. So our biggest single problem is housing. And that's contributed to also by the fact we have a really great university in town that attracts people from all over the world, and those people tend to be extremely wealthy, and that helps drive up the cost. So a 4-bedroom old house, they may rent out each bedroom for $6 or $7 a month per bedroom.
700.
Yeah, and so that really makes it hard. for families who are struggling and don't have a good history to get housed. So that's number one. Number two is there are jobs out there, more than there have been for a long time. People are finding jobs, but childcare is a huge problem. And there was an article in the Register Guard a couple of years ago that ran the numbers, and that traditional daycare costs more than college. And so there are a lot of folks out there who have skills, but they don't have daycare available in the community that's affordable, and so they can't work because what do you do with the children when the children are young? So those are two really big barriers. And there's a myth that people are coming from all over the country to be in Eugene because we're so generous. And that some people do come from elsewhere, but almost always they have ties here, they have family here, they were here when they were young, and they're coming back home, in a sense. But that gives us an excuse to say, well, we don't have to help those people. But they're here now.
Thank you.
Jean?
Although I was very well fed as a child, I still remember how painful it is if you get hungry when you're a little kid. And so that really troubled me when you mentioned that these kids were at 6:30 to 8 o'clock on the bus. Would there be a possibility of providing some kind of something that they could have on the bus? Some little packaged nutritious bit or something?
It's a coordination issue, problem. So, for instance, if we send a snack home with the students so that they can eat it when they come back, or a box of Nutri-Grain bars to the parent, that might happen, that might not, Might stay in the backpack, might never get in the backpack, it might be eaten all the way home. There's just, you can make the effort, and we do. We provide, I have a donor that provides snacks for all the McKinney-Vento students at Edison. And when they have those long bus rides home, the teachers always allow them to take, a snack or two on the way home, because that's another time that they're very hungry, right after school. So it's great, and if they're associated with First Place at all, there's food there, but it's just a little bit of a coordination, challenge, and the success, you're just like, thought I sent that box of Nutri-Grain bars home with you and you didn't have anything, so yeah. Sometimes they sleep, they just sleep on the bus on the way in, and then when they get to school, but you're right, they're hungry. I met a mom in a parking lot last week, and she has 3 children and 2 dogs, and she's been in that situation for a long time. And my experience with a lot of families that are in cars, living out of their cars, is they do have Section 8 vouchers. They are ready to move in. They have that with them. I mean, they've jumped through many of the hoops. There's just no place to move into. So my point was, it was early, I met her at 7, and she was waiting for the school bus to pick up. So she has a place where she stays at night, and then she drives them into a point place where all 3 of her children grab the bus. So anyway, the little boy opened the door, and he had a big bag of Ritz crackers, and he was just eating one after another, and I don't know, we brought them food, they have snacks in the car, but just, people are hungry, definitely. I wish I had a real great answer or solution to that. Sorry.
Okay. Brad?
Yeah, just one comment, and I've experienced this in another group that I work with here, but I think one of the most, if not the most important thing you said this morning as a group, in my mind, is the culture of our congregation understanding the culture of the group coming in. That's extremely key. And although in myself, I think I do, not necessarily, because there's so many factors that come into that. So we appreciate you coming in and talking about this. Thank you.
It's complicated, and
Yeah, it is.
there's always a lot you can learn, around poverty and culture, of poverty and homelessness. It's tricky, and the biggest thing is staying out of judgment along the way, because you operate from your culture and your framework and your thinking and your experience, right? And you're like, well, why can't you just have the box of Nutri-Grain bars, you know, wherever you are, and give them one. How hard is that? How hard is that? In my world, my kid would have that Nutri-Grain bar if they got on the bus, you know, but that's from my experience, and, you know, so that staying out of judgment, you know, is a really, something we all have to do all the time, and call ourselves on it when we don't. Yes?
Yeah. Gwen?
I work for early childhood cares, and I do home visits with families that have kids from 0 to 5 years old, and I run into families on the edge all the time. And what they end up doing is they're calling and calling and calling to try to find the last $100 for their rent that month. And where can I mean, I always suggest First Place. I mean, but it seems like if they could just have one person they could call that could, you know, do a little social work type thing to help them get through to that, you know, because
We have right now a diversion program, it's called, where we have really flexible money, and we've done that with a lot of people, but it's a one-time grant and it goes away at the end of June. And usually the money is really inflexible, but this has been really exciting to be able to do that. Here's $100, here's this, okay, I'll pay your rent, you missed it, because I know you can make the next one. So,
I mean, this family has
for a little while,
working parents.
call us about diversion, but the money will be gone at the end of June. But that's really needed, it really is, because it costs a fortune to get rehoused.
Yes,
And
especially if you have an eviction.
if you have an eviction, then you just don't get rehoused.
And it is important that, you know, the money comes and goes, so it's always okay to reach out to any of those agencies. Because if it isn't happening today, it might happen tomorrow. Sorry.
Okay, we got time for 2 more questions. So Mike and then Peggy.
Just real quick, off the top, how many housing units do you think we need right now in Eugene area? Just, I guess.
I can do that.
William.
St. Benny's has built 1,240 units of affordable housing. HACSA has about 1,600, and a third agency has about 500. So there's 3,500, 3,700 units in the community. If you could double that tomorrow, there'd still be a waiting list, but the waiting list wouldn't be as long. So it's boggling. St. Benny's waiting list for their 1,200 units was over 3,000 for a while, and we just sent out postcards to everybody saying, you still want to be on the list, and some of the people had disappeared or we couldn't reach them. And we got the list out to 500 families. But it doesn't open up that rapidly, so even 500 families is a tremendous wait list just for the one agency.
And discouraging.
Just, it's not truly a question, but just on the feeding the children's issue, when I heard that often children don't have breakfast at home, they don't have enough, they come to school, and then they have a fee to pay for the cafeteria. And not all of the families can pay that fee, or they're short money on it. And if that's the case, those children don't even get a lunch, even at school. School can't feed them if they haven't paid their fee or they have some other program. So I contacted our son, who is active in the school, and I said, can I adopt a child? And I pay their lunch fee, so that one gets it every month. He connected me with the cafeteria person at that school, and she said, yes, but if that person is absent, we can't give that food to someone else because I've identified this. So what I do is I send the cost of the monthly fee for the food, and tell the person in front of in the cafeteria to use it where necessary.
Nice.
So she can, and you know, it's just a tiny little bit, I know, but it's something I could do.
Excellent, excellent. And those are going to be students that are not qualified as McKinney-Vento because it's a title program. They have access to free meals if they're identified in the program that we run. But there are those, and that's the same with the needing to pay the rent. You know, it's just
close.
Just so close, but can't, you know, you make enough money, so you need to pay for your lunches.
But I tried to imagine a child who didn't have breakfast at home coming in. They said, we don't have, they haven't paid their fee, you can't eat here either.
No, yeah.
Talk about hunger, that's.
Melanie has one more squeaker question.
Yeah, so how many of the families and children you deal with are new immigrants? What percentage or?
Well, I don't have that data.
Okay.
I mean, that's something probably the school district could get
I have
to, but
that
I don't have it off the top of my head.
On Hispanic, but I don't have anybody in this shelter that fits the brand-new immigrant model.
Yeah.
I can't think of anybody at Edison.
Yeah.
And it's not because they wouldn't have access to, I mean, obviously
No,
they, yeah,
obviously.
okay, so that's interesting. Yeah.
So I'd like to ask for a generous round of applause.